To start with, I think the first thing to say is carbon in media pretty much all comes from electricity and use of electricity.
Absolutely.
So this in the medium term, if we manage to get sustainable electricity sources, renewables or whatever solution, is a good thing. We know actually to have a sustainable society, we need to electrify things as far as possible. That's why there's fuss about electric cars, for instance.
So I had a brief conversation with Phil the other time, and we rounded up some questions, and it is great to have you, Damien, with us. So I'll just start off with my first question, which I was thinking. The name of the company has Net Zero Media. So who inspired the founding of Net Zero Media and the name?
The name, I think, was Damien. The idea. So Damien and I, before we started Net Zero Media, we've been already business partners for some time, working at Benedictus Media, which is a B Corp media buying and planning agency. And as a B Corporation, our aim is to try and buy and plan media for good, to connect people with brands, businesses, and organizations for good. And so when in 2019, 2020, we discovered that Facebook alone was creating back then a ton of carbon for every million impressions, and we were buying millions and millions of impressions, we realized we had a problem in terms of just actually living up to our own standards and ethos as a business. And we did a pitch for a client where I said to the client, wouldn't it be great, I'll work out your carbon for your media and we'll be able to offset it. Because back then everyone still believed in offsets, so things were a bit different then. And Damien said to me, you know what, you have a lot of bad ideas, but I think this one's good.
Right.
So it came originally out of purpose. And it was Damien really who realised that actually it had legs as a standalone business.
So you guys had thought of this idea way back, right? And then I think before Scope 3 came into picture, or it was like around the same time?
Well, we started off the business prior to COVID. So this was when we were, as Phil mentioned, with the advertising campaign, looking at how we could actually offset that activity, neutralise the activity. And that was the genesis of the idea.
Right.
During COVID, things were pretty quiet. The industry itself was more focused on just surviving, less so on its impact and purpose. It was around about that time that we met one of our other founders, business partner, a gentleman by the name of Chris Sewell, who's our head of research. And Chris has been doing this for 18 years now. Collectively, we have close to 20 years of experience measuring carbon emissions for the advertising industry. So I am pretty sure that's a long time before Scope 3 was concerned by carbon. We're still developing DSPs in the programmatic industry.
Yes, of course, because I know Kelly's past was very much in programmatic.
And I think in COVID, during the times of COVID, the consumption also went up quite a bit, and that also...
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the reliance on digital during COVID was a significant increase. And obviously, everything digital requires power.
Right. Now in Net Zero Media, I mean, you both come from, you have built your careers in media strategy transformation. So how do you complement each other?
It's a very good question.
Well, I like to think that the way that I describe it is that I'm the head and Phil's the heart. You know, if we're a single organism, then Phil provides the purpose and the insight and the direction, and I activate that. I help bring it to life. But Phil is very much at the heart of everything that we do, keeping our clients front and centre, and the purpose of our organisation, the reason why we do things.
Right, that's a beautiful one.
And from my part, I couldn't do any of it without Damien, because he actually knows how to run a business. He's a trained accountant. He's a very skilled dev. He brings a lot of the actual business skills. So I think we complement each other, like he says, very well.
But nice.
We have have very different skill sets, but we have a very shared outlook on how business should be run and on fairness and trying to make a better world, really.
Right. You said, you are an accountant as well as a dev, is it?
Yeah, that's correct. My background is accounting. So I started off just over 20 years ago now applying my accounting trade. I moved over to the UK and fell into digital advertising by virtue of the Daily Mail Group over there, Associated Press, where I was involved in acquisitions and mergers. And then as part of that, just fell in love with the advertising industry and ad tech in particular, and then moved around the world back to Australia eventually in various ad tech or media technology companies.
Okay. No, I was very curious on the dev part also. So you kind of picked up dev also alongside, and then you started building things in ad tech as well.
Yeah, I don't know how many people would vouch for my coding qualifications. I'm sure I frustrate more developers than I'm supported by them.
No, I think absolutely. I think, and I think as we move forward, right, it's the intent which matters, and I think you have kind of done a cross-functional thing completely, which is fantastic.
Exactly, and I think I understand enough to be able to provide direction to a development team around clarity of requirements, specific outputs that are expected. Communication is a big part of the development process. Understanding what your clients are looking for and being able to translate that into an application, which is fundamentally what we have done with Net Zero Media.
Yeah, I was going through your website and I saw some of the screenshots of your dashboards, and they seem to have fairly a lot of amount of data with respect to the emissions and with respect to the sources of traffic, the type of traffic, and then the trends and conversions, everything. So it seems to be a fairly detailed product which you have kind of built, a very comprehensive one.
Yeah, we had to design it from the perspective of the media industry. So having worked in the industry for a very long time, I've had the benefit of seeing what works and what doesn't work and why things typically fail.
Right.
And simplicity is always the paramount consideration when it comes to technology used by the advertising industry. Develop the most amazing piece of technology that transforms, optimizes, does the most incredible things to performance, but if it's difficult to use, or if it's overly engineered or overly complex, it won't get adopted.
Yes,
you're fundamentally dealing with people who are very short on time and at the end of the day are under a lot of pressure to meet clients' demands. So keeping things simple is incredibly important. So the way that we approach Carbon IQ, which is our carbon emissions measurement platform, is we design it from the end user's perspective. So how easy can we make it for a sales rep and a media owner to be able to input the minimum amount of information into a platform but get the maximum output and maximum insight.
Right. Because I think if you look at the media buying platforms such as a DSP or any other interface, right, they already are loaded with so much of data points that adding more data points to it automatically becomes a little cumbersome for the person who is consuming. And that's where I think the point which you are making is that how simple can you make it and how easy to consume can you make it so that it doesn't appear as an overwhelming thing. But all right, if you look at it, that's a very important metric I need to look at. It's a very important consideration. Yeah, I totally agree with
the most important metric that we're producing from the platform is the actual carbon emissions, whether that be at a campaign level, at a channel level, sub-channel level, or an individual ad product level. It's that information that comes out, which is critical to both the media owners and the advertiser.
And if you look at the, so on one side, you're an advocate for sustainability, neutrality, as much as possible with respect to the advertising industry. And on the other side, you have this increasing media consumption. And if you also look at the increased compute requirements because of AI, so they are, I think, They're two extreme things, right? On both sides of the balance. And how do you balance this? I mean, how do you look at this? How sustainability you're going to balance with respect to the increasing consumption of media?
I mean, to start with, I think the first thing to say is carbon in media pretty much all comes from electricity and use of electricity.
Absolutely.
So this in the medium term, if we manage to get sustainable electricity sources, renewables or whatever solution, is a good thing. We know actually to have a sustainable society, we need to electrify things as far as possible. That's why there's fuss about electric cars, for instance.
Absolutely.
Because it allows you to get rid of the fossil fuels that power it. So you have to think that with advertising, the increase in carbon is hopefully a short-term problem. That said, it's a big one because it's not just increased digital consumption online and in apps, it's also digitization of, for instance, out of home. So you can buy billboards programmatically now, digital billboards in Australia. In Australia, something like 75% of billboards are sold are digital billboards now. So I think it becomes, as you say, there is a real problem in terms of balancing these two aspects of the industry. In the end of the day, I think where we land and where I think a lot of people in the industry land is to say, this is a bit like when you're driving a petrol car, you want to use as little petrol as possible to get where you're going. So it becomes about effectiveness and efficiency. So while we obviously are really interested in the final amount of carbon from a campaign or from a format or so on, increasingly we're encouraging clients and agencies to plan towards the most efficient media in terms of grams of carbon per 1,000 reach or per acquisition. So very similar metrics to those we would use when we're looking at actual media effectiveness. And I think there's a big message there too, and one that I think the marketing world is being slow to wake up to, is that a campaign that is effective in terms of carbon, that has low grams of carbon per 1,000 reach per acquisition, is going to be very effective in terms of dollars per acquisition as well.
I think it would directly translate to that.
Yeah, because it's going to be about things like avoid ad formats that don't really work.
Yes.
An ad that doesn't work is definitively a waste of carbon as well as a waste of money.
Right. But don't you think that you need the support of the regulatory bodies, you need the support of IAB, you need the support of the industry bodies which kind of govern and at least give out guidelines for the agencies and the brands to implement? Because see, I clearly got when Damien said that there was purpose with you guys. I mean, when you started this, right? You did Facebook advertising, you understood that there is a problem and it is not matching your ethos. So you went ahead and built a solution for it. Now, does everybody think the same way, or do you see it very specific to geography, the awareness levels, or there is a huge push which you are trying to do to increase awareness? Because it is voluntary as far as I think right now.
I mean, yes, look, I think it's fair to say that territories with stronger regulatory frameworks, the UK, Europe, where people have been, and the UK, I think people have been measuring carbon now for 6 years, like as companies, it's very strict. So yeah, there are countries that are much further ahead of the curve because of those regulatory environments. In Australia, we're just seeing regulation come in. I think when we first started, because we were quite early in the piece with net zero media, because so many people were looking to offset their carbon footprint, there was a straight commercial argument for it, which was, if we measure your carbon accurately, you'll get a smaller figure so you can buy fewer offsets, you save money. So I think that was clearer. Now it's more about, I think with this regulatory framework, often it's expressed in terms of risk, the amount of carbon that a company is emitting. So it's getting weighed in kind of from an investment perspective in terms of valuation of companies, in terms of which media outlets certain agency groups will work with. For instance, Group M, I know, will include sustainability criteria in their contracts with media suppliers these days. So yeah, it's a slow journey because I think you're right. There's no immediate monetary gain. It's more of a slow burn. It's like getting your accounting set up right. If you have feet of clay, at some point things are going to fall down.
Yeah.
We're working in an industry where it's primarily dictated to by the requirements of our end clients. Our end clients are advertising brands. Advertising brands are equally dependent upon consumers to buy their products.
Right.
We're seeing an increase in consumers making choices around the sustainability credentials of the brands themselves. And advertising sustainably is just another measure by which they're judged. So you'll see increasing numbers of RFPs that go out from advertising brands to media agencies where they are specifically asking about how they manage their emissions in relation to planning and buying media. It is growing in importance. The regulatory bodies, as Phil said, focus very much on investor protection. So looking at risk management, looking at measurement from a corporate perspective around the emissions. So it becomes more of a compliance and governance argument. But our vision is very much to establish a transparent and accountable advertising ecosystem that prioritizes environmental responsibility. So making sure that we can provide the tools and platforms to enable participants in the industry to make those more informed, data-driven decisions around emission.
No, absolutely.
But to your point earlier, Deeps, I think awareness is a big problem. Advertising has a bigger carbon footprint than aviation. In Europe, it's commonplace to avoid flights if you can, to drive or take a train to avoid too much carbon. I'm not sure that same logic is yet getting applied to advertising because it's ephemeral. It's not such an obvious thing. But in fact, if there are big companies, for instance, particularly office-based companies with large advertising spend, you can find that your advertising scope 3 emissions are, really considerable, 30-40% of overall emissions.
That's a lot.
Sorry, I pulled that number out there. It obviously depends on the business.
Yeah, that's a lot. And I think if you look at the, I've been speaking to some agencies, some large ones. When they get a campaign, the objective is to drive as many impressions as possible, or as many page views as possible, or as many clicks as possible. Depends on the revenue model they are working on. And as what Damien was saying, right? They need to meet the budget and they need to finish the budget. And they need to kind of meet the requirement of the volume of traffic. And as the volume increases, then I didn't see much, I would say, inclination or awareness in them to look at this at any point in time. They just need to meet the requirement. And that's where I think, we at ClearTrust also kind of work on detecting fraud in the whole funnel, right? So we also say that, okay, when we come into the picture, your volume might reduce. And that is something which is not taken very positively, that if my volume reduces, my revenue reduces. Similar with carbon, if you're buying a lot of, I would say, non-neutral media, then you are automatically you'll have to cut down on that eventually. That acceptance, I think, will, as you say, it's a slow process. It will come over a period of time, and then the regulatory bodies will also push it as much as possible to make sure it is in the checkbox in the RFP to make sure you are meeting it. Otherwise, you don't get the contract. It's that important is what I feel.
Yeah. It's very much aligned with brand safety in that you're very much focused on eliminating waste from the transaction. So if you're placing your ad on non-brand safe areas or non-viewable areas, it's generating a carbon footprint, but it's also not driving any outcome for you.
Right, absolutely.
Yeah. The example I always use, sorry Damien for repeating it for the umpteenth time, but it's a great one. Skippable video. Yeah. If you think about the product, even before you think about carbon, the concept is a bit flawed, right? Because you're paying to get someone to not watch your ad or watch just a bit of your ad.
Right,
There's very few ads that are effective if you watch a bit. So if I do a brand study, and we've done this at the agency with YouTube and Facebook and other providers, and you compare buying non-skippable video 100% with the mix of video that often publishers recommend, the non-skippable video comes out much, much better in terms of brand uplift and awareness. If you look at it from a carbon perspective, it's even more stark because when you skip a video, generally the video is downloaded into your cache anyway. So you've used the same amount of carbon as if you watched the whole video. So that's a really clear example of where both performance and carbon are affected, positively if you eliminate the waste, and that's the kind of the thinking I think think we need is to actually apply common sense. Like you say, is the impression viewable? If it's not, it's really a waste of everyone's time, right?
Yeah.
Not to
In
mention
this
time.
case, skippable media, I think the user's intent is kind of met. He never wanted to watch it, but everything else remains the same. Nothing changes. Right. So
Yeah, it's a curious product.
So I mean, how do you measure the carbon cost of the delivery, and where do you see the biggest offenders? One is ad format you mentioned. There could be some other types of ad formats also. Where else do you see the most repeat kind of offenders coming in your case?
In terms of channels and formats, it's a bit difficult to say because, as I said, once you start, as I say, looking at it in terms of carbon versus reach, carbon versus outcomes, it's a balance between lower carbon mediums and more effective mediums. So I think it's, and it's difficult to say. Out of home used to be very low carbon comparatively as a broadcast channel. Obviously now it's digitized, that carbon's gone up a great deal. That said, there is now an opportunity because I can buy the digital out of home by time slots programmatically. So while that means that, let's say I only buy peak hour traffic, so 8 in the morning till 9 in the morning, whatever, 5 and 6 in the afternoon, then I'm going to get very high reach for the same carbon footprint as if I'd run the same ad in the middle of the night, right? So again, you can start thinking about ways of planning to get the most out of the format. But I mean, I think it's fair to say generally digital is quite a big offender. But even old school free-to-air TV has a pretty big carbon footprint. I mean, it obviously depends a bit on the area you're broadcasting over, how much energy you need to use, this kind of thing.
Right. So do you keep? Sorry. Go ahead. So do you keep a threshold that this is the threshold for this channel or this medium? That beyond this, it is really. You're really an offender, or you're really on the other side.
Yeah, I mean, I don't like talking in the absolutes of offenders or good actors. I think there are underlying assumptions that drive the fundamental use of power across the industry in total. As an industry, we are moving to a greater digitization of formats. We are moving towards more personal consumption of advertising and content. And that inherently generates more carbon. I guess what we try to do is, Phil indicated, we look at specific formats that are being used and the relative comparative metric being grams of CO2 emissions per 1,000 impacts. And what you'll notice is that for certain tactics or strategies, there will be within a channel or sub-channel different formats that have higher or lower emissions factors associated with them. And the example that Phil gave around skippable versus non-skippable video is a classic example of that, whereby a small change in the strategy or the plan can actually have a positive impact and an overall reduction on the emissions, both at a comparative level and an absolute level.
I think when your customers look at these metrics, you must be seeing a direct planning improvement for the next campaign. I think that would be a measurable outcome from their perspective, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So we've seen clients who have achieved a 7% reduction in emissions just by making some of those simple adjustments to the way that the activity is planned and bought.
That's what I was trying to get to.
Logic around that further, So one thing is some formats are better than others. Another is just literally apply common sense. If you have a message you can tell in 15 seconds, consider just making 15-second TVCs, not 30-second TVCs. Guess what? 30 seconds has twice the carbon as 15 seconds, Or, UX, user experience. On a website, every click is more carbon. And every click, you're going to lose traffic. So again, fewer clicks, less carbon, better conversions.
But how do they?
So I think it's kind of a mindset. I think actually a lot of the tools are there. It's about buying quality ad formats which work, which people see, where they get the message, where they get the emotional impact of the ad that drives the purchase impulse or whatever it might be. In my ideal world, what I would like to see is fewer sort of trash ad placements, like for me a lot of programmatic display. It's not terribly useful. They're small ads that you get blind to. I don't know how much good they're doing anyone, but really big brands where just, you recognize the brand so well that it does have some impact. It would be nice if, in my dream world, you'd have the media providers saying, well, actually, if we get rid of those less effective ad formats and we charge more for our premium ad formats and we make them more effective, then, ultimately that's the most effective solution, I think. In the meantime, from a media planning perspective, you can make sure at least your clients are only getting those positions.
I'm just thinking loud when you say this, right? I think probably net zero media, just my thought, could also suggest different types of ad formats to their clients. That there could be a complete recommendation guide for them with respect to the ad formats which eventually should be used. And now there are so many custom ad formats also which people use. As you said, if the brand is well recognizable, has a good recall, then you don't need the whole 300 by 250 to let a user know that, hey, you need to click on it. Or you don't need a very heavy, rich creative loading up there. It could be a very different ad format at that specific publisher's placement, not taking that kind of a carbon. So I think I'm just thinking that because in your case, if you have measured and provided certain metrics, then next time around also you are measuring it. Now, if they have implemented your recommendations, the emissions should go down. If they haven't, then repeat publishers keep coming in. The same measurement keeps on happening. So what can net zero media do in order to block it also? Or maybe avoid it from happening itself? Is there a publisher list you recommend? Is there an ad format you can recommend? What else can you do in order to stop it at the first place itself? This is what I was thinking.
Yeah, and this is a really interesting discussion because what you're talking about there is a specific advertising technology, and I would argue that net zero media doesn't operate in the advertising technology sector. We're not an ad tech platform.
Right.
We don't actually participate in the transaction.
Right.
Either a delivery of the advertising or the purchasing or selling of the media. We're totally neutral, independent, and would classify ourselves as a measurement platform. So really focused on the emissions themselves and understanding the drivers of those emissions and then making recommendations on how to reduce those emissions. But we don't operate in the actual supply chain itself of the advertising. Unlike other companies, Scope 3 is an example of an ad tech company that is involved in the actual media transaction itself.
Absolutely. No, I was not saying that you participate in the transaction. I'm saying that you are providing a recommendation in the form of a metric, right? There could be other recommendations next to that on a hyperlink which they click, and this is net zero's recommendation that this is how it should be with respect to the formats and everything. But you don't participate. If you look at Scope 3 there, I think
when we do
No, go ahead.
I was going to say, when we do a report advertiser, there's always a recommendation section. Again, it's going to take time for agencies to start being able, particularly the big agency groups, to necessarily be able to act on these recommendations. Back to my favourite skippable video example, and I remember we did an audit for a big financial brand in Australia. In the meeting afterwards with the agency, I pointed out that a lot of the carbon in their plan was coming from digital video, and if they have to run lots of digital video, particularly they were running quite a lot of skippable video, over 50%, and we said, if you turn that all into unskippable, then you'll reduce by however much carbon. But the agency was part of one of the big agency groups. The people who do the planning are over on one side, the people who do the buying are elsewhere, and the people who do the buying have a deal that they buy all the formats from whatever. So they're also, this is one of the reasons why change is slow, is because you need to actually change the way people are working inside some of those agencies.
That's how it is structured, and I think you need to play with the ecosystem. If I look at Scope 3 is becoming more of an infrastructure layer now. I think they are getting into the whole set of metrics, right from attention to trust to carbon, all of them. I think they're kind of getting into a very different league. Recently I saw they have launched something on brand safety. A proper their own LLM is what they have launched and introduced. So they're playing into a different league now. They have moved beyond carbon is what I could say. Now, all right. Okay. So I have.
And I think you're exactly right.
Go ahead, Phil.
What I was going to say, you're absolutely right. I think they came in initially with the carbon play, and you have to think that it's a company established by one of the people who invented programmatic media. He's a very brilliant guy, and I think it bothered him that he invented a form of media that turned out to be very polluting, or a lot more polluting than non-programmatic. And I think increasingly they are suppliers of a greener / less polluting form of programmatic advertising, rather than just a measurement company, and which is great. There are some good solutions there for people. As Damien said, for us, we try and stay very clearly on the measurement side, so we're entirely independent, so that we can go to publishers or agencies and give straight consultancy advice.
I mean, what does success look to you in the next 5 years?
What does success look like to us? Well, I mean, we have ambitions of obviously operating outside of Australia. We're in the final stages of a large media owner in Canada, and we have many ongoing discussions with large media owners globally. So certainly being able to offer our services in markets like the UK, Australia and Canada as a starting point. I'd like to see a greater emphasis from an advertiser's perspective on emissions. So certainly understanding as a first step what their emissions are, how is it broken down by channel. Because if you look at the two measurement methods, or fundamental measurement methods for carbon emissions at the moment, you have spend-based and activity-based. So spend-based is the most common method at present, and what that does is it says, okay, let's work out how much I'm spending on advertising this year. I'll multiply that by a factor of 0.6%, and that's my emissions for the year.
Okay.
Now, it's an easy approach, but it doesn't give me any insight into what formats, what locations, what channels are actually contributing to that total emissions number, and it doesn't allow me to reduce those emissions any other way than by reducing my spend. Now, I don't know the last time you spoke to a CMO. They're not too keen on reducing the amount of money or budget that they have available to buy media. They're always asking for more budget. They're putting my accounting hat on. So the activity-based method is the approach that we take, which allows them to apply a level of data science to those emissions calculations. And by working with organisations like AdNet Zero to roll out the GMSF, which is native in our platform, I think we stand a much better chance of doing that. So
Right.
Success for us certainly is a combination of growth and impact. So certainly being able to start to make those impactful changes to the way that the industry operates.
So when you say that activity based, right? So as granular as you go, the more handles your customer, the advertiser or the agency gets to kind of tune their carbon emissions, right? One is the ad format, one is the from.
That's exactly right.
So when you say this, I mean, for whatever you can share, so what are the nuts and bolts of this? I mean, how do you get the emissions? How do you compute them? Are there certain algorithms you use, or do you get this data from government bodies, or till whatever extent you can share? If you can share some more information in terms of your accuracy also, that how accurate is your emission data?
Yeah, absolutely. So the calculation of emissions it's a complex process. There are multiple inputs that are required to be able to spit out a number at the other end. AdNet Zero, the global industry body, has released a set of frameworks that apply to each media channel, which give guidance on how to calculate emissions. Now, those calculations, those frameworks, they're fantastic for standardizing the approach that organisations take to the measurement. On top of those algorithms and those calculations, you have to overlay a set of logic around how the media industry operates. You have to apply power generation profiles that relate to each specific market that your media is bought and sold in. You have to overlay a set of corporate overheads that apply to the selling and distribution of media that are applied back to a campaign. So there are all of these different factors that need to come into a platform in order to measure the emissions carefully.
Yeah,
so it is quite a complex process.
I was on a meeting with Net Zero this morning because they're still building out the framework. It's one of the things they're dealing with at the moment is because the more data you've got, the more accurately you calculate, and so it's not just about listing what data agencies and advertisers need to be able to supply, or media owners. It's also about saying, well, if you're unable to get certain bits of data, what's the default value that we're going to use?
Right.
So like Damien said, like there are certain constants you might have for energy production, this kind of thing. I think one of the things we have seen with advertisers who've measured their carbon over several years is pretty much without exception. The first year you do it, a lot of the data you're having to use averages, medians, basically numbers that you can defend, that make sense logically, but which aren't based on empirical data. And one of the things that every advertiser we work with gets better at is supplying more detailed data, which is quite interesting. It means generally their footprint goes down anyway, just because they're actually giving the right figures. But that's a real problem. And I think that's probably one of the biggest barriers to adoption, is the ability to get all of the data you need to calculate the carbon accurately, when that data may be spread across creative agency, media agency, publisher, and your marketing department. Or maybe even, in the case of your own electricity, use your CFO or COO.
Now, how do you see this in perspective of the walled gardens, like say TikTok or Snapchat or Facebook, right? Now, have you had ever a chance of kind of reporting back the Facebook emissions back to your customer who is using Facebook, and what was their take on it? Or have you heard of a take from Facebook on it, that no, we take care of it, we are using kind of renewable energy, or tomorrow we are going to put our carbon neutrality metric within the Facebook dashboard? What do you see? Do you see a pushback from the walled gardens towards you, or they don't care?
So Facebook's an interesting one in that, yes, we've calculated carbon on Facebook. I don't think we've had many open conversations with them. Certainly at the moment, they're going the other way. They seem to be trying to make themselves good in the eyes of President Trump. I gather their latest data center is going to be gas powered, which is odd, because it's not only worse in terms of carbon, but these days renewables are cheaper, definitively. So I think it's a conversation that's Facebook. Google, well, it's not exactly a walled garden, although obviously they're fighting an antitrust suit, so that's debatable. But they, on the other side, have just released a calculator that tells you the emissions from their end of the ad production. So that would be ad creation, the work that goes on their servers to do whatever you do to come up with the search results. And displaying my ignorance.
But that's grading your own homework, right?
But they stop short of. Yeah, A, they're marking their own homework. B, confusingly, they don't bother including the distribution of the search results or the final consumption on a user device. But it tells you that they are. Do you know what I mean? It's a real issue for them too. I imagine because particularly your big European advertisers, UK advertisers are going to be really hard on this. In terms of effectiveness, the walled gardens problem is simple. Is that I think they've become more and more of a black box. So you never really know when your ad dollar is being well spent or not.
Oh yeah. Experiences with Meta and Google traffic when we measure them across multiple types of campaigns, and though you would assume that it is Google and Meta, the traffic should be clean, as much as clean as possible, but we still see a good ratio of invalid traffic coming in from both the channels, because eventually not everything comes from the walled garden. They also have public pages. They also have extended audiences which are masked. Nobody knows from where it's coming from. So eventually the results are as shady as they can get. So that's what we see as well. All right. So I'll come to my next interesting question. Between the two of you, who's more likely to show up with a carbon calculator in one hand and a media plan in the other?
I mean, I'm more likely to forget either of them.
I think you're more likely to turn up 15 minutes late with a lunchbox, and I'll be there 15 minutes early with both the carbon calculator and the media plan ready to walk him through it.
Right. So a full tummy gets you both the carbon calculator and the media plan.
Right. But you can't work on an empty stomach.
It's not to say that I wasn't thinking to take the media plan with me when I took the lunchbox.
That's interesting. Now, all right. Now I have something. Okay. Yeah. So we have a little section called this or that, rapid fire. So I'll just ask. Maybe we can take one by one, right? So first, Phil can take, then second, Damien can take, and then give me an answer in a lesser time in which you measure carbon emissions. All right. Some 40 milliseconds. Right. So for Phil, carbon footprint or media footprint. All right, Damien, early mornings or late nights?
Early mornings.
Virtual events or in-person networking?
Sorry, I didn't catch the question.
Virtual events or in-person networking?
In person.
In
For
person.
me.
All right,
Sorry
Damien.
to say that during a virtual event.
I wish I was in Australia. Damien,
Me too.
global campaign or local impact?
Ooh, that's a tough one. Let's go with local in.
Local impact. All right. Phil, net zero or carbon conscious?
I'm going to say carbon conscious. Because ultimately, if you can get to absolute zero, that's better than net zero.
And the last one goes to Damien. Save the planet or disrupt the industry?
I'd like to think we can do both.
Yeah, that would be my answer.
Or maybe disrupt the industry first and then automatically the planet gets saved.
Well, let's save the planet first, and then we can disrupt the industry.
There's not much disruption on a dead planet. Volcanic
Right.
activity aside, you know.
Right. We don't want to see a dystopian world. This was, I think this
Maybe
is...
if AI has its way.
Sorry?
I said maybe if AI has its way.
Yeah, maybe if I... Yeah. I think the way it's kind of shaping up and the way you see... I'm sure you guys must be following the AI news also as much as you follow the other news. Right? So...
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so I keep seeing this images and the news with respect to the gigafactories probably Musk is making or China is making. And yesterday I saw a gigafactory being set up in China, which is of the size of San Francisco. And it is a complete city in itself. It's just a factory. And this is full of data centers. This is full of production units they are doing for different kind of stuff. But that's heavy. That's real heavy. And this is the kind of compute, I'm not very updated on the renewable energy part of it, but if you can throw some highlight on that as an additional question also, that how do you see the graph of renewable energy coming up and kind of impacting the big tech to embrace them as soon as possible? What do you guys think?
Personally, I think that now that renewables increasingly have financial might on their side as well as sustainability on their side, I think they're going to be I think the transition is, personally, I think it's inevitable. I think that, people by and large will choose cheaper energy. I think in the immediate term there are exceptions of very energy intensive businesses like aluminium smelting, for instance, where where you're going to need a very steady supply of electricity, and that's, I think, as I understand it, dependent on advances in battery tech. But to that point, there's at least one smelter in Australia that is building a massive renewable energies plant by their biggest smelting plant. So there's clearly a view that if that battery technology isn't there now, it will be soon. So, personally, I think that we've stuck with fossil fuels as a race a lot longer than we would have done if the fossil fuel industries hadn't done such a great job, sadly, of communications and advertising, spreading misinformation. BP came up with the idea that you should measure your personal carbon footprint. Somehow it's our fault. The idea of a carbon footprint for people came from BP. I think, obviously, fossil fuels have been responsible for huge advances in human development and comfort and living. They've also made some people very wealthy, and people don't like to let go of that easily.
I I agree with that. I also have some very real concerns around, I guess, the political climate and what that is doing to investment in startup initiatives, efficiency, research projects, and the like as it relates to sustainability. We're starting to see situations where research projects aren't getting funded on the basis that they deal with climate science or sustainability. The reports today that came out around the CSIRO receiving questionnaires about the type of projects that they're involved in. Universities in Australia are getting similar questionnaires, and where their projects touch on sustainability or climate science, then their funding is at risk. We're seeing the same in the US, where there is a definite shift in government policy. That concerns me, because a lot of the advancements and all of the hard work that is being done could be very quickly undone. Could end up with this gap in innovation to drive a reduction in emissions.
Absolutely. Totally agree with this.
Deeps, what do you see happening in India?
That's the reason I had asked for the geography and the territorial question to you. I think very few large brands here seem to be conscious about carbon, but largely I don't see that at the moment. Spends in India right now, I think the digital media spends in India would be about, say, $1 billion a year, which is like nothing compared to what US is spending right now on digital media. I don't see a lot of traction with respect to this at the moment, but I'm sure it'll catch up once, because as an example, right, the AI model which India is launching as the national governance model, that is on renewable energy. So once that comes in from the government, right, then I think you will see a lot of traction coming in with respect to accepting it and having these metrics in place. So at the moment, I think we're looking for a lead on this in India.
And do you find that the government in India is sympathetic towards climate change and supporting initiatives to reduce emissions?
Yeah, they are very bullish on it. So there are a lot of programs being done with respect to renewable energy as such. So right from solar programs to the battery tech, which you're saying, the hydrogen powered cars, this CNG based vehicles. So there's a lot of green push with respect to the vehicles which are being the buses and the auto rickshaws which go in India. So there is an effort, right, and the new initiatives from the government with respect to the larger scheme of things going to, which maps to certainly 1.4 billion people also, are having renewable energy in mind very clearly. So we have very strong governance with respect to this. It's a matter of time before it starts trickling down and people start following it. It starts getting embedding with respect to advertising, I would say. In advertising, still people use a lot of tools which are, right, for example, if you're doing Facebook or TikTok or Google, right, all these are not from India as such. So people are using their tools and their solutions right now. So with respect to the local advertising, you would see a change much faster. With respect to digital, you will see a change slightly slower. So that's what is.
It's interesting.
Yeah, that's what happened. So I had these many questions for you guys, but I think I would ask one last question to you. That so this podcast would go to different audiences. It would go to our followers on LinkedIn, my followers on LinkedIn. Then it would go to a newsletter to our customers, to the prospects also we work with, and we would be promoting this as well. So any message you would want to give to the audience who would watch this podcast, and we would actually carve out a special clip for that, 30-second clip where you would want to give a message to them, which you would want them to have a CTA on, some call to action, which they would want to look at.
If you're working in advertising and you haven't started looking at the carbon in your advertising, you're missing a big opportunity. If you follow the carbon and you avoid waste of carbon, you will avoid waste of ad dollars, and you will end up with more effective advertising. At some point, I think this message will penetrate, and I think that is probably the key message.
And if you think anybody in the audience would want to reach out to you, so the best place to reach out to you would be netzeromedia.com, and they could find the contact there, right?
It's netzero.
Media.
Oops, sorry.
All right, so that's the website.
So, yeah,
on the website they can get a contact. Got it.
netzero.media, or you can email us at sales@netzero.media or support@netzero.media.
Perfect. Sounds good. Thank you so much for this.
Just up on LinkedIn.
Sure, Damien. Thank you for taking time out. I think it is your evening, but you still took time out for about, I would say, a little more than an hour session with me. We'll be very happy to share this with you for a review, and then once you guys are okay, we'll take it forward and start distributing this podcast and have you on our website as well. It'll be great if you want to link this podcast back to your website also, whichever way it works for you.
Yep.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you guys. Have a very good evening, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you, Deeps. It's been great talking with you. Yeah. Take care, and good luck with combating waste in advertising.